You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, the lady sings it, that makes it official. Welcome to the big show. As always, the Chris Voss Show has been here for you. We're here for you, damn it. 16 years and over 2,000 episodes, bringing you the Chris Voss Show live, just so you can enjoy that daily Chris Voss Show glow that lets you walk around in public and people go, my God, how smart are you? You just have this glow coming off of you. And just tell them it's the Chris Voss Show glow and they subscribe at goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss one of the TikTok and Chris Voss Facebook.com. He's the author of the newest book who joined us on the show. It's called What Are the Odds? A novel out October 22nd, 2024, tomorrow actually. David List joins us on the show. We're going to be talking about his insights, his experience, his travels throughout Hollywood and writing books, etc., etc. David List is the executive producer, I just made up a new title of a job.
I'll take it. Could have a higher royalty than the one I have.
That might be more on the royalty scale there. David List is the executive producer of Miramax's new Fletch film, Confess Fletch, starring John Hamm. You may remember that guy. He's quite the looker on the for the ladies there, eh? After graduating from Albany State University, he began his career as a TV packaging agent in the New York office, the William Morris Agency. Subsequently, he moved to Los Angeles and segued into film and television production as a senior vice president of development and production. First for Dodi Fayed, and then for legendary film producer Albert Rudy. Is it Rudy or Rudy?
Rudy.
Later, he founded his own company, Road Dog Industries. He's a native New Yorker and now living in Los Angeles. And What Are the Odds is his first novel. Welcome to the show, David. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Chris. Again, thank you for the invite. It's nice to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you as well, sir. So give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
Instagram, it's at thatdavidlist.com. Who would believe, when I first joined up, David List was taken like everywhere. So it's at that David List.
At that David List. What are the odds?
It's just David List on Facebook. www.thatdavidlist.com is the new website. And again, just my name on LinkedIn. And now open for all donations. And
yeah, go to his GoFundMe, folks, and send him a cash app there.
Yes.
So he's not struggling. I'm just kidding. He's a Hollywood writer or whatever. So let's get into it. What Are the Odds? Your newest novel that's just come out. Give us a 30,000 overview of what's inside.
30,000 overview. Basically, it really is, without at the risk of sounding cliche, it really is a story about life for what I believe is many. When you wake up one day, you take a look in the mirror and you wonder, how the hell did I get here?
Or in my case, what went wrong?
That's exactly right. And you're standing, as in the prologue of the book. It's sort of a metaphor for that in a way. You're standing at the edge of the abyss, and your life is flashing in front of you. You never anticipated that this is how things would turn out. And I don't want to give away the prologue, but
sure,
when they're confronted with that question, are these the men that robbed you? It's sort of also that moment when you think back on, all the times in life people perceive Is language an issue on this show, by the way?
No, you go ahead. I mean, just don't go too crazy because YouTube.
It's it's all the times you perceive you got fucked, and if you hadn't made that deal, how different life might have been if you didn't take that step to the right and went to the left. And when as I say, who hasn't at some point in their life said either to themselves or thought out loud, what are the odds? I mean, of that happening? And when the situation that's happened, when the odds of it happening are so astronomical that they're uncalculable, is it irrational to not write it off as coincidence and wonder if we are on some sort of unforeseen, invisible path where every second of your life has led up to that very second when the incalculable happening happened? And these three guys, and what are the odds? The odds of their three lives intersecting is uncalculable, but it happens.
There you go.
Yeah. And when it happens, I'm sorry.
Byline, never discount the value of luck. It often determines whether you live or die. I guess I've had some pretty good luck so far. I'm still here.
It's also absolutely many of the smartest people on the planet just never got that lucky break. In fact, Hollywood, there's an old saying about Hollywood that it's paved with the most talented, the streets are paved with the most talented unemployed people around.
That's an unfortunate thing, yeah.
They often say, that a lot of movie stars would probably not get the role if they had to actually audition for it. But they're great movie stars.
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of movie stars you pick because if you have them on board on that title train or whatever, people come out to see the movie. Like Tom Hanks, he can command a box office. There's lots of actors that can, but
Tom is obviously he's one of those that not only are big movie stars, but also amazing actors.
Yeah.
There are a lot, especially more current. A lot of movie stars, though, that acting, by the time the film is out, they should be thanking the editor and for piecing together what then appears to be this great performance.
I do that with our show, where I act like a really stupid man, and people actually finally believe it after 60 years.
And I'll tell you pull it off seamlessly.
I do. It's almost like I'm not even acting.
Not many people can do that live, that's for sure.
That's true. But I've mastered being an idiot. So that's what all my girlfriends tell me. So David, tell us a little bit about some of these three characters in the book. One's just tease out a little bit if you could. One's like a New York Police Department detective.
Ray Dawson, a former NYPD detective out of the Bronx, who is unfairly let go from the force and stripped of his pension. Mm. And, he never thought at that point in his life, this is a guy that is as a cop to the bone, and I've known a number of cops, over the years, and, he's as much a cop as he is a man, let's put it that way.
Oh, and an integral part of his identity, would you say?
Absolutely. From a family of cops, a long line. And he gets an opportunity which he also thought would never happen in a million years. His second ex-wife opens the door for a second chance.
That's really rare.
Extremely rare, incalculable.
Yeah, it's pretty incalculable.
And because underneath it, they really do love each other.
That's unfortunate.
But a lot of life got in the way, yeah. And he is not going to get it wrong this go round. At least so he thinks.
So he thinks.
Yeah.
But women, you can always muck things up because we're good at that as men. I don't know.
Absolutely. And, with the help of his former partner, who's one of his best friends, they're both former Marines. He's going to use up even much of his savings and plans this romantic weekend getaway in Costa Rica, where he's going to propose to her again, vowing that this time he's going to get it all right. And
those
a
words.
chance encounter in the hotel elevator with Wilbur Bailey, a crafty, wily,
Crafty.
extremely neurotic, environmentally conscious fugitive on the run with a $5 million bounty on his head. And that chance encounter, like I say, there's, I think one of the great myths in the world, in life, most often, is that, our jobs are not who we are, it's what we do. I think that's a load of crap. Oftentimes, our jobs are who we are, and someone is miserable in their job when they're in a job that doesn't reflect who they are. And if they're fortunate, they will one day find it and risk what they have in order to get there and put it all on the line.
Yeah.
And, Ray, he's now torn between, because he is who he is, but he's got the love of his life, a fugitive that has a $5 million bounty on his head.
Yeah.
And ultimately, again, without revealing what and how it happens, the third guy is Phil Dancourt, an IRS revenue agent. He is the one that has been investigating for 5 years the company that Wilbur used to be at, but embezzled millions that was due the IRS in tax money.
Uh-oh, that's not good.
But it's kind of odd, given that Wilbur is a real, environmentally conscious kind of a guy, that he was working at an oil company. In many ways, without going off too deep into the water, once, a lot of this, like I say, it in many ways, albeit in a fictitious story that often kind of toes the line between absurdity and reality, is my journey. Each of these three characters, in some way or another, are all me, in some characteristic that they each possess. And as it, once the seed of the story was sort of planted, in many ways, believe it or not, it also kind of parallels the biblical story of David and life's trials and tribulations and the opportunities that often come when you're at life's lowest point. It's why Wilbur, actually, when he's at his lowest point in his life, the only job he can get that satisfies his needs is with an oil company.
Wow.
The very type of company that singes the very fiber of his being. And you'll see that kind of theme, faith is also a theme throughout the book, especially for Phil Dancourt, the IRS agent, who's on this, self journey. They each have suffered, I think if you look on the back of the jacket cover of the book, or in the hardcover that's coming out tomorrow on the inside jacket cover, once these three men's paths intersect, it propels them on a journey that, on a much deeper level, in very unexpected ways, takes you on a much deeper dive about life's larger issues of love, loss, loneliness, happiness, friendship, and the commitment to values that are larger than yourself. And you have a lot of laughs along the way. That's one thing, because again, oftentimes you have to find the humor in what are often some of the worst situations, or you can end up in that abyss. So it's a lot of fun. I know that might sound like it sounds like a little bit of a downer, but it's not. It's this wild, crazy ride, which life really is. I think the difference often between people that not only have an ability, if because it is still a business, and that the business determines you have an ability to write, but the difference really is that, what I've found is that they're much more introspective observers of life and others, especially of others, whereas most people don't realize that their life actually is filled probably with some amazing stories, but they just kind of breezed right over it. And it becomes in the distant, and they'd be hard pressed to really remember.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. You've got quite the storied upbringing. What was some of your influences? What got you, in your words, down the road that you take and eventually down to here? Tell us about the Confess Fletch picture, maybe, if you do.
No, that alone is a story in itself. Especially since horror is a big genre.
Yeah.
But my general career trajectory was, like you mentioned, after Albany State with a marketing degree, I knew a lot more about what I didn't want to do than what I did, and ultimately got a gig as the chauffeur to the president and CEO of William Morris in New York, where they still operated out of the time because the TV business was still run out of there. And it was an amazing experience. And I would work in the mailroom when I wasn't driving, but having a chance to develop, that type of rapport with the president and CEO. I mean, for my first day on the job, you never drove limos, just they had 2 company Jags. And by the first day on the job, not that, these are politically correct names today, but I get my first day, it was 1 p.m. All I was told was go downstairs, get the car, Lee, heading out with Lee. And I'm now within a half hour, I find myself in this Jaguar sitting next to the president of the agency worldwide. And in the back seat was Bill Cosby, Barbara Walters, the anchor. And I believe a big, I think in that first trip, it was a big Broadway guy, Jerry Herman, like La Cage aux Folles. And for the next 6 months, I drove around movie stars and movie people and Lee and Lou, and became an agent there, like by the time I was 24.
Wow, 24 an agent of William Morris.
24, 25, right around there. Eventually, I kind of realized, I did have another mentor there. The gentleman who was the head of the TV packaging division. And he was like really staunch. You got to move out west because the TV business is even moving out there. I'm a dinosaur. And if you want to have a shot at any career, you got to go out west. And of course, I made the brilliant decision of going out west during the largest writer's strike ever, like at that time. So the industry was shut down. And I ultimately came out here and stayed an agent for a little while, but then left. And my first job, I went onto the production side. And through one of my writer clients and his attorney that I knew, I met Dodi Fay, who was now looking for a production executive. He was being given a whole new company with an overall deal at TriStar over the movie Hook, if you remember Spielberg's Hook.
Yeah.
Which was kind of an interesting story in and of itself because, at least as Dodi later explained it to me, when J.M. Barrie, the author of Peter Pan, was still alive, he gave all the rights to Peter Pan to the Ormond Street Hospital in England, one of the oldest children's hospitals, not just in England, perhaps all of Europe. And I'm not, again, this is how I recall the story, but in essence, Dodi had a younger brother, I believe, that had come down with spinal meningitis, and the hospital truly saved this kid's life. Oh, wow. And doing so, they developed this rapport with Dodi's dad, obviously a very wealthy gentleman. And he ultimately made a number of donations to the hospital in a very sizable way. And in those days, I think copyright law in England was life of the author plus 50 years, after which the material would then go into the public domain. Today, it's like America, life of the author plus 75 years. And again, let me know if I'm going on too long-winded here, but
no, you're fine.
The copyright was coming up. And, though obviously there's a great deal of emotion between the Fayeds and the royal family, he was still a very powerful guy in the House of Parliament. And the hospital approached him to see if he could use his influence to protect those rights to Peter Pan. They didn't want to lose the money that it generated. And he did. And he got the House of Parliament to pass a law that the rights to Peter Pan shall never enter the public domain. Could be the only literary rights in the world for that. But in any event, you then cut to more modern times. And, Doty, as I knew Doty, and we worked together for a couple of years, I found Doty to just be a very gentle soul.
Wow.
He almost seemed shy to me. I mean, he would have several dinner parties at his home here, a number of which I was at, and they were always just very kind of quiet, 15 people over the house for dinner, great food, wine, and then everybody would go to the screening room and watch a movie.
Yeah.
But when I first met Doty, he was telling me that, it was one of those, he had people over for dinner, and one of those people over for dinner was a gentleman named Mike Medavoy, who at the time was the CEO, the studio boss of TriStar Pictures.
Oh, wow.
And it was small talk. Hey, Mike, what are you up to? Doing this, doing that, and doing Hook with Spielberg and Julia Roberts. And Doty was like, oh, and I left one thing out. In return for what Doty's dad did, the hospital knew he had this other son, Doty, that seemed to be operating in Hollywood a bit. And as a return kind of gesture, they gave the Fayed family sort of the unconditional life option, on the rights to Peter Pan, so that if anybody in Hollywood wanted to do anything with it, it had to at least go through them.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mike Medavoy, doing that. And Doty was like, Peter Pan's Hook? And Mike was like, yes. He goes, you can't do that, Mike. My family, we have an option on the rights to Peter Pan. And Mike, as I understood it, looked at him and was like, Doty, you might be rich, but you're a moron. It's public domain.
Oh, wow.
3 weeks later, and they were millions of dollars already into pre-production.
Oh.
3 weeks later, they had to give the Fayeds a very sizable check and Doty an overall deal for a new company. And that's how the whole company came about.
Oh, wow.
And, I worked with Doty for a couple of years and then segued from that to working with Al Ruddy, who is, I think could have been the first movie he made was The Godfather.
Yeah.
And I worked with Al for 3 years. And truly, up until the day he unfortunately passed away not that long ago, a few months ago, truly one of my all-time favorite people ever. Mm-hmm. One of the last, his body of work, number one, was unbelievable. But one of the last really true legendary great raconteurs of the business, with this great deep booming voice, had this deep gravelly voice. An amazing storyteller. And man, I've got several years worth of great stories, from Al. And then after that, I thought I'd take the shot and do it on my own. And as a man, as a producer. And, in the industry, as if you're an agent, you're prohibited by statutes and all that from producing a film, because you cannot, an agency, you're basically
conflict of interest.
An employment agent for people in this industry, but for creative people. So you can't be their boss and the employment agency. But if you're a manager, you can. Oh. But by statute, you're prohibited, though, from procuring work for your clients. Only an agent can do that. You can do it in conjunction with their agent or their lawyer, but you cannot do it on your own.
Oh, wow.
But you can work with them with their material and ultimately produce a film or be a producer on a film. And so several of my clients had come back to me now that I was managing, want to know if I would again represent them. And I said, sure, I had a book here, not even a Fletch novel, because the original Fletch made in the 80s with Chevy Chase, it was all based on a series of novels written by an author named Gregory MacDonald. And I didn't know Greg, but I had, he had written over 26 novels. I had another novel of his here called Safekeeping, truly one of my favorites. One day, that too, I'm going to get it off the ground. Mm-hmm. An amazing little story of an 8-year-old boy from England during World War II it's very Charles Dickens-esque, but sent here to America for safekeeping during the war to live with his uncle, Thaddeus Lowry, who, of course, turns out not to be his uncle. And he ends up on this crazy journey through the streets of New York where he touches upon America's national character. In any event, I tracked Greg down agent at William Morris called, no longer a client. Ultimately, I was able to track down his attorney in New York, who at the time was a gentleman named Arthur Green, also one of my favorite people. Arthur has also since passed away, but he was also, Stephen King's lawyer. And I believe Greg actually introduced him to Stephen. But in any event, Arthur, told me that Greg was in the process of, being signed at the time by another big company. And I knew actually the gentleman. I thought, okay, it'll end there, because, I was a nobody. Now that, it doesn't make a difference how long you've been in the business. Once you go on your own, you're trying a different end of the business on your own. You're a nobody until you get something off the ground.
That's true.
But I knew them, and you'll get to the front. Hey, Dave, man, I love you. Let me give Greg a call, and I'll be right back at you, because I didn't have. Now that I was on my own, I could not be spending money on optioning properties. They know you're looking for a free option or for $1 to take a shot. And of course, I'd never heard back from him. But it was like 2 weeks later, I get a letter in the mail from Greg McDonald, and letting me know that he was aware that I had inquired about his novel Safekeeping, but he wanted me to know that he was not going to be signing with that other manager. And if I needed any further information, please feel free to contact his lawyer, Arthur Green. Or if you can contact me directly at the below email address.
Oh, wow.
And that's how I met Greg. And ultimately, in one email, can I call you? And he gave me his phone number.
Mm-hmm.
I think that first phone call, we were on the phone for about 2 hours. And almost never really even talked about the novel Safekeeping. It was just about life. Here was a guy that was from Boston, Harvard grad, like a yachtsman type of way of talking, from an editor at the Boston Globe, who now, when I met him, was living on a 200-acre antebellum cattle ranch in Pulaski, Tennessee. I just so odd, not to go too off tangent here, but, he once told me, I asked him how he ended up down there. He was like, you know what, David, when I wrote Fletch, they were bigger even overseas than they were in this country.
Oh, wow.
And the publisher sent me on a worldwide tour, and I suffered the greatest tragedy of my life. I lost my anonymity. He was a very introverted guy, Greg.
Yeah.
And he says, and I got to experience something very few writers ever get to experience, what it was like to be a movie star, especially overseas. Wherever I went, we were mobbed. So when I got back to the States, I found the one place in the country where no one knew how to read, Pulaski, Tennessee. And that's where I went. And ultimately, we just developed this great rapport. And Greg offered me the shot. Take the shot on Safekeeping. Go with God. For $1, send your papers to my lawyer. I'll sign them tonight.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
And the long and the short of it is, not that long after, he calls me again. And he says, listen, you mentioned you're managing people. It's been a long time since I've ever enjoyed a conversation with anybody in Hollywood. How would you like to manage me? And I was like, gosh, Greg, you're a retired novelist. I don't really know what I'd be doing for you. And I'm sure there's some things we could talk about. I was like, I was a big Fletch fan. I thought Universal had owned Fletch. And, it'd be an honor. You'll be my first honorary client. Fantastic. Send me your papers. I'll sign them tonight. And he says, so can we get down to business? I said, sure. He goes, I own all the rights to Fletch. I was like, what? He says, yeah, I own it all. Universal owns nothing other than the movie they made. I was like, you got to be kidding me. He said, nope. I said, well, it's either worth nothing or it's worth a gold mine. He said, He said, it's yours. Take your shot as a producer. Let's get another Fletch film going. I was like, good Lord. Within about a week, there were 5 studios after the rights. And that was June of 2000. And we ultimately made the deal with Harvey Weinstein.
Harvey Weinstein, I've heard of him.
And that led to a 10-year waste of life. And Harvey, I never really thought about this till after the fact. for all his film successes, he never once ever developed a comedy, a straight comedy. And in any event, he spent a lot of money on writers, and that nothing ever went anywhere. He was losing Miramax, because Disney owned Miramax. And so we went through that. And ultimately, even though he had shelled out over $1 million or $1 million for the rights to the novels, he still lost those rights. We gave him some time to extend, but about 10 years after that, we got the rights back. And that's when, instead of launching myself as a producer with a bang, it was with a thud. So I partnered with very big producers, Steve Golan and Michael Sugar. Steve was the founder of one of the biggest management production companies out here, Anonymous Content. He unfortunately also has since passed away. And Michael, though, who now has his own company, is one of Hollywood's biggest, producers. Both he and Steve, Academy Award nominees. So we partnered up, and Michael's one of my oldest friends out here, and we set up at Warner Brothers. They paid a lot of money for the rights to the estate. And to this day, the estate is still the only, of Fletch, is the only entity I still represent. Because Greg, too, has since, Greg had passed away. And it was while the project was at Warner Brothers, and I'll really try to move along here, where, like I said, I never pursued being a writer. My writer clients used to always tell me I should write. That's why I think I knew my representation career was probably not long. When your own clients are telling you, you'd probably be a better writer than you are an agent or a manager.
Wow.
The project, Warner Brothers had hired a high-priced writer who did not deliver and was let go. And the project was floundering. And I was running out of money. And I rethought the movie myself, an entire new take as a producer. And thought, because Warner Brothers was like, what are we going to do now? Just find another writer after that guy, it was just floundering, going nowhere, dying on the vine, as they say.
Yeah.
And I was hoping maybe if I got the heavy lifting out of the way and people liked what I had, maybe Warner's would throw me a few bucks to buy the story off me, and then find a writer that they liked that didn't, So I called Steve and Michael, my co-producers, and they were like, yeah, you came up with an idea on what? What do you want us to do? They ultimately heard it as friends, and they loved the pitch. So they were like, all right, don't do anything. Let us do your bidding for you at Warner Brothers. And so on. And they called the executive on Warner's, great guy. And he was like, all right, we love Liz, but he's never written a thing in his life. You want me to go into my boss and tell me we're going to hire a list on a pitch? They convinced Warner's to just hear the pitch.
Yeah.
They did. After that, they called Steve and Michael and said, hey, be honest, it was a great pitch. I mean, really just awesome. But still, what the hell? What the fuck do you want me to do with it now? And it was going nowhere. What ended up doing it, though, was because I represented Greg and the estate of the Fletch rights, Warner's had paid a lot of money for that. And that first writer ate up a lot of the time on the clock of the option. The estate, which I consider, Greg's widow, Cheryl, his son, Jason, they're like second family to me. But they just, and David, we love you. Whatever you want to do, if you think you can make it happen, just do it. And ultimately, I by allowing Warner Brothers to reset the clock for free, they gave me the shot to write the script.
That's
even though
amazing.
It was, and I'd never written anything, let alone for a major studio. It's the kind of story that really pisses a lot of other writers off. And, it ultimately worked out. I don't want to really get into why the film did not get made at Warner's, but from that script, I ended up getting signed by agents myself. I was getting called in everywhere around town, other producers, now that the script was out there. Because once it was delivered to Warner Brothers, the executive called me and said, "Listen, man, you blew us away. You can really write, dude.
Wow.
Scripts, you hit all 10 tenets of what it needs to be a Warner Brothers movie." It's already been approved to go to directors.
Wow.
There were 15 names on the approved directors list, 12 of whom were not available for 2 years or more.
Oh, wow.
And the other three were never going to. I'm like, guys, I'm not the big gorilla here, but are we really going after directors like David O. Russell for Fletch? I mean, it's not going to happen. They wanted to, Warner's made a certain type of film. Yeah. They wanted to make Fletch for $100 million. Lunacy. And they wanted to do it with one of their people, with Brad Cooper or Channing Tatum, with Todd Phillips, who did the Hangover movies, for them. And if you don't get that kind of one of their people, they don't really have any interest. One actor who read it was Jason Sudeikis. Wow. And he wanted to come on board. There were changes going on at the studio. The president of production was leaving, Jeff Robinoff. Greg Silverman was taking over. Greg had actually brought in the project to Warner's. And ultimately, they attached Sudeikis. Big announcement in the trades. Jason Sudeikis on board as the new Fletch at Warner Brothers. And then this film summarily got killed. Oh, wow. They, like I say, they wanted to make the movie for $100 million. Ultimately, the project then moved to another studio. Because studios buy stuff from each other all the time. Another studio loved the script, loved Jason, just wanted to make the movie. They were now paying me for a rewrite just to get the budget down. Wow. Knowing that if they made the film, they would now have to pay back Warner's for all the money they had put up on Fletch, but they didn't care. But of course, that studio was Relativity, which 4 months into the deal went filed bankruptcy. Ryan Kavanaugh's largest bankruptcy in history, in entertainment history. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, the project then moved to the new Miramax, where they now, and with the estate's approval, we were now going to redevelop it as a TV series. Hmm. The long and the short of it is several months into that deal, the CEO of Miramax leaves, which means everything is on the bubble.
Oh, God.
Ultimately, Bill Block came in as the new CEO of Miramax. Uh-huh. And I knew Bill over the years. And like any new executive, he came in and he fired the entire staff of Miramax. Everybody I'd been working with now gone.
Oh, God.
And a lot of times projects are given back to people as long as ultimately Miramax gets that money back. But he wanted to keep Fletch. I mean, he loved the idea, he loved Fletch. So ultimately, we made a deal with them to do that for the estate. Mm-hmm. But now, 17 some odd years in, Bill knew that like any written material, there's copyright law. Mm-hmm. So in order to clear the chain of title on my script, because I was now at the time working with Miramax before Bill came in, adapting it as a 1-hour pilot in several episodes. Mm-hmm. And I was the exec producer. I also represented the estate. So to finally move on the project, Bill knew he would have to make a deal with Warner's to get the draft I wrote for them, mm-hmm. and with Relativity to get the draft I wrote for them. Hmm.
So did the film ever get made?
It did. It ultimately, but again, I couldn't be the writer because when Miramax contacted Warner Brothers to acquire my script, Warner Brothers wanted to get back in on the project. And ultimately, they were like, we own this script. If you want to do this, it's going to be a Warner Brothers show. We'll give you a fee, Miramax, and a credit, and go with God. We own everything. And it was awful. And I ultimately backed out. I didn't like what was going on. And I gave Bill and I met, we sat down over a drink. And now, and I said, Bill, I'm basically fletched out. And I also have an obligation to the estate to do what's in their best interest. But now it's my script that's holding everything up. It was heartbreaking because, it was a big shot for me. And ultimately, I worked out an arrangement with Bill and Miramax that gave Miramax now their clean shot, even though that meant starting over. But Bill looked me in the eye, and I had told him I want his word that he's the boss. He's the studio boss, controls the purse strings, that he'll do whatever it takes to get the movie made. We shook hands. He gave me his word that he would do whatever it took. And Bill lived up to every aspect of that. And I think it still took him 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And one day he called me up, said he ran into John Hamm.
Oh, wow.
Said, The guy loves Fletch. I was like, really? I wish I knew that 15 years ago. And ultimately, John came on board, and he was now a producer with his manager, Connie Tavel. I had to take a back step as an exec producer because, again, I had to stay out of it so as not to cloudy the chain of title, and give Warner's. And to John's credit, he really put his name and as a producer and as an actor out there. And ironically, it was COVID that helped actually get the movie made, because it was the only time that he and the director, Greg Mottola, who they loved each other, were both available. The stuff they were working on had been canceled.
Oh, wow.
And ultimately, Miramax financed it for about $25 million. And that's where it then hit a little bit of difficulties with Paramount, who was the actual distributor. But Paramount was going through their own big changes, which you may be aware, which is now in the process of being sold. And but it was even back then, but you then factor in COVID. So it got released, about it was, I guess, already, going on 2 years. But it got a limited release in the theaters and then sort of went into the Paramount system, first on Showtime and now on Paramount Plus. But I'm thrilled, that it got made. The reviews across the board were all very good. It was a very different Fletch than the one I was making when I was the writer. But that's literally how that one thing back yonder at Warner Brothers, that step altered the trajectory of my life. And I dove in no matter what the risk was of now, having the guts to actually write.
Wow.
and really put it out there. And I've paid a price, that's for sure. Many of which deal with the themes that are in that novel.
Oh, wow. And now you've got your first book out, and off you go. As we go out, give us your final thoughts. Tell people where they can pick up the book and any .coms where people can get to know you better.
It is available for at least one more day today on pre-order, but it comes out tomorrow. Available on not only Amazon, but any bookstore. Go to any bookstore from Barnes & Noble on down's website and plug in what are the odds and my name, David List, and the book will come up, and you can either get it at that bookstore or if they don't have it yet in stock, because some of the independent bookstores, might take a little while, but you can also order it right from them and send it out. But I'm hoping, I think people are going to have a lot of fun with it. And it's quite a ride. And I've already thanked you publicly, Chris, on my social media for purchasing 200 copies for friends and family.
What? Let me check into that. Yeah.
Of course, with your home phone number and home address for anyone who didn't get their copy from Melty. But yeah, Blackstone Publishing also, they've just been a dream come true, really great. And it was a wild process and amazing, the effort and number of people at the publisher that go into this happening. And Dana Isaacson, my lead editor, and my agents, Erica Spellman, Robert Gottlieb, but Erica's my point at Trident Media Group in New York. Like I say, they're just amazing.
All right, so give me your .coms as we go out one last time, so we have it.
At that David List on Instagram, David List at Facebook on Facebook, www.thatdavidlist.com is the website. LinkedIn, my name. X, which I haven't really used all that much, is I think also at that David List. And I knew I had it written down, all of them here. Of course, now that I need it, it's in the abyss. But I just think, I think people are going to have a lot of fun with the book, men and women. Although I will say, women seem to really dig it. These are, classic old school heroes, of which I think the world really needs today. And if anybody is looking for a respite from some of the political harassment, this is a good way to do it. A great fun. It'll suck you in. And that's my story today, and I'm sticking to it.
Sticking to it. Thank you very much, David, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
I hope I did okay.
You did great. You did great. Wonderful stories. Thanks for tuning in to my audience. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss One, the TikTok and Facebook, ChrisVoss.com. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Chris.
Great stuff.